Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MCA OpenChain India Working Group Meetup. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome all of you here for this event. I am Kushabh Sinha. I am an associate with Mishi Chaudhary Associates, and I'm your host for this evening. A little bit about us. MCA is a law firm based in New Delhi, and we specialize in technology law, intellectual property law, and general corporate advisory. Our work is underpinned by in-depth research and strategic planning, which lets us help our clients resolve their most demanding business challenges. We cater to a variety of clients, and we also represent clients before the courts and tribunals. Today, we've gathered here to talk about OpenChain. The OpenChain project began as a conversation about reducing overlap, confusion, and wasted resources with respect to open source compliances. Over the years, it's now evolved into an industry standard. What OpenChain does is that it makes free and open source software more accessible to developers. It reduces overall compliance effort, thereby saving time and resources, and it also allows us to conform to a stable community-backed specification. Now, this is a complex issue, and there are no easy answers. But to help us with that effort, we're fortunate to have a very influential group of speakers with us today. So prepare yourselves to be challenged and inspired. Let's get started. Our first speaker for the meetup is Shane Caldwell. Shane is an expert in communication, security, and business development. His professional accomplishments include spearheading the licensing team that elevated Open Innovation Network into the largest patent non-objection community industry, thereby establishing a leading professional network of open source experts and aligning stakeholders to launch both, first, the first law journal, and second, the law book dedicated to open source. He currently leads the OpenChain community. He is the general manager at the OpenChain project. He is an advisor at the United Nations Technology Innovations Lab, and he also serves on various boards. We are immensely grateful that he has agreed to be with us here today, this evening. Let's hear from Shane.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to everyone at MCA, and thank you to everyone on the line. My gosh, I think this is our biggest meetup in India yet, by far. This is awesome. So the OpenChain project is now about 4 years into our mission to get into the market to help solve the compliance issue between companies in the supply chain. We launched the standard in October 2016, and we've seen quite stellar growth since that. OpenChain, to a large degree, has been a de facto industry standard with adoption from companies focused on technology or well-versed in technology to this date. But we're at a pivotal point in the OpenChain project where the industry standard for open source compliance is about to graduate as an ISO standard. We expect our voting process to complete September 22nd of this year. And all things being well and no further ballots required, we will be published as a formal international standard within 6 weeks of that date. This is important because it means that OpenChain will have an ISO number, which makes it super easy to include it in procurement contracts and things like that. For some context of where we've been and where we're going next, the OpenChain project's origins were essentially in identifying that we share a lot of supplier companies, and no one entity, no matter which multinational you pick, is big enough to fix the supply chain. So in dealing with all of these suppliers, we needed to find a way to unify the requests and the answers regarding open source compliance. To be frank, this was a question we probably should have solved a long time ago. Open source has now been in market for over 30 years, and it's been in the enterprise sphere for about 25. We're a little bit behind the ball on solving the problem, but we have solved it. The OpenChain International Standard is identifying the key requirements of a quality open source compliance program. It does this in a way that allows organizations of any size in any market to adopt it, and it accomplishes this through essentially identifying inflection points, saying where you should have a process without being too demanding about what the process contains. This is intentional. It means that companies are free to fill out the processes as best suited to their size and their market, but everyone fills out the overall structure at the same points. OpenChain has had a lot of success. We have a huge amount of activity. We have local work groups in China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, obviously, Germany, the UK, and we're just about to start North American groups as well. To be frank, North America already had de facto groups. We used to meet during conferences, but obviously some slight global events have changed that. So we'll be moving on to a formal virtual schedule. Anyhow, tons of activity, hundreds of companies. The OpenChain governing board alone has got 20 companies announced on the board. These companies range from ARM through to Toyota, through to companies which are very different like Microsoft. In essence, everyone who's dealing with open source has agreed that this international standard is the way to go. The big deal for the India work group is quite simply that very shortly will be an ISO standard. This means if you're in the supply chain, you can expect your customer companies to be asking for conformance to this standard. Or if you're dealing with the supply chain, you now have a simple way to ensure that your suppliers will approach open source licensing in a consistent manner. There is nothing more simple and consistent than an ISO standard number. Everyone, everywhere understands it. Even if they have no awareness of open source, they get it, that it's important to follow the ISO standard. My mission is to try to help and make sure that the Indian work group has access to all of the information and all of the support needed as we enter the ISO process. You already have superstars on board like Mishi, because she knows everything about everything. So you can just ask her any question about anything. It'll be fine. But the OpenChain project as well has got some written resources that can help you out. We've got over 400 documents on our GitHub which help answer all types of questions from how do I train people? How do I do that? What type of slides are used? Well, you can see the slides used from Qualcomm, Samsung. You can see how people set open source policies. We have all that material in the background. But we're learning. And it's a very interactive process. OpenChain is not preaching. It's run by user companies, for user companies. And the whole deal right now is that we have hundreds of companies involved. We're graduating as an ISO standard. We're currently pretty happy with our reference material and some of our support, but we need to up our game. We're going to have thousands of companies involved in just the next half year. So whether it's in India or whether it's somewhere else, we need to make sure that people get the right information and the right support that they need. The interesting thing for the Indian work group, and this is where I will draw some inspiration from other areas like Japan or Germany, is that we found local activities really useful. So in Japan, by way of example, companies didn't tend to share information about open source compliance. It wasn't that they thought that the open source compliance was a differentiator, but rather companies were very nervous about being exposed as not awesome. And it took a while to get past that and for everyone to acknowledge that we were all facing the same challenges and therefore the same solutions, and if we combined our knowledge, we'd get there faster. The work group provided a platform to do that. It meant that some of the most advanced companies and some of the companies just beginning got to talk with each other and get really comfortable with each other. And that escalated in a crazy way. In Japan, we've got 7 sub-working groups. Just to name one of their accomplishments, they've been dealing with bill of materials. They decided to adopt the SPDX bill of materials, and they've deployed it. But when they deployed it, they decided not to use the traditional XML methodology. They decided to make something they call SPDX Lite, so that the Japanese supplier companies could quickly deal with SPDX documents in Excel. And this small activity, this very practical activity, actually became part of SPDX 2.2. And that kind of shows you the power of these work groups. As user companies, as we solve the problems, we change entire things, like international document standards for software bill of materials. OpenChain is unique because we're way up in the stack. We're at the very top of the stack on saying, here are the basic process items. And then you say, okay, how do I fill out the processes? Okay, I use this other standard like a software bill of materials. How do I fill out something like automation? Oh, I use this other project, this other solution. OpenChain is where we start, and then we trickle down. And that means that every OpenChain workgroup around the world, as we solve the problems, we're actually contributing an enormous amount of knowledge way outside of the core project. And it's super important. In Germany, by way of example again, we have a lot of the German automotive sphere involved. One thing that's happened recently is that BMW joined OpenChain as a board member. But quite apart from that, and quite apart from the fact that Bosch in Germany has been a board member for years, a lot of the companies in automotive in Germany got involved in OpenChain because they were trying to think, how do we triage open source in a way that is sufficient for automotive fidelity, alongside functional safety, these kind of mission-critical approaches. And their natural instinct was to find a single standard to do it. They coalesced around OpenChain, and then they were finding ways to describe that in the automotive industry to each other and to their suppliers. So they've contributed a lot of material. Like we have this really cool new procurement document coming out very shortly. First of all in English, but it will be translated into many languages. I mean, this procurement document reflects a lot of knowledge from companies in places like Germany. Now, as you probably know, Germany is a bit of a stickler for details. In fact, and here's a crazy statistic not related to OpenChain, 40% of the tax-related regulation in the world is in the German language because of Germany. So they obviously really like details. And when it came to OpenChain, they coalesced around it because it was a way to get the details without too much overhead. We have found the contributions from these local areas really important, and it's been super interesting when, let's say, the German work groups release information that goes to Japan or China, and vice versa. So the opportunity here in India, for you and for us, in every part of the OpenChain project around the world, is that we can try to understand what's the market situation right now as user companies that you're dealing with. What are the challenges? What's going right? What's going wrong about open source compliance? How can OpenChain unify this? You know, how can adoption of OpenChain make sure that all the companies are putting effort in the same space, and that when you deal with any supplier, you're asking the same questions and getting the same fundamental answers? And second of all, how can the Indian experience inform the rest of the world? Quite frankly, experience from companies like Wipro, Lyra Infosystems, experience from companies dealing with both the Indian market and the international market provides a new insight. And this insight cannot be underestimated. A lot of what we've done around open source for many years has been US-centric. And I'm Irish, by the way, I'm not American. Disclaimer, entire Trump thing, not my problem, not my fault. Anyway, the entire thing with open source originated in the US and has tended to be US-centric. But the fact is, in the global world, the majority of open source activity is not US-centric. So we're dealing with the need for our knowledge in different market spaces to be genuinely local. And whether we're dealing with the Chinese market, and indeed we do a lot there. In fact, one of the OpenChain board members is Oppo, an enormous mobile technology company, which recently sold their 180th million handset in India. Way to go, Oppo, and way to go, Indian consumers. These market situations in India, in Japan, in Korea, in Germany, and in India will be very different to what we see in North America. So what you do, what you share, what we can put out as requests for help for the Indian market will actually increase the effectiveness of this international standard. And it's vital that we do that right now. OpenChain as an international standard is already widely adopted. It's a de facto industry standard that's been adopted by companies ranging from Fujitsu to ARM. It's out there, and whether or not you're Microsoft, OpenChain conformant, or you're someone completely different who's OpenChain conformant, like many aspects of the British National Health Service, it's ingrained. But with the ISO release, we are looking at a situation where what we put out in ISO, this version of the standard, will be in market for 5 to 10 years at least. It's going to be enormous. It's going to affect every single company. Every single company on this call today will have to address the OpenChain industry standard, whether it's in asking your suppliers to follow it or following it yourselves. What we do to make that as frictionless as possible will be critical. And we already know that it is extremely beneficial to make it frictionless and extremely possible. What we don't know today, and what we can learn today, is how we make it incredibly efficient for India. And I think we've had a couple of meetings, and we've had a chance to get to know each other. We've had a chance to share some ideas, and it's been very useful. Indeed, we've had organizations in India engage with OpenChain for a considerable period, whether it's organizations like Lyra, who've been involved for a long time, organizations who more recently have joined things like our partner programs such as YPro, or indeed organizations such as MCA or SFLC India, which have been involved since the very beginning. The engagement has been there. The question today is, how do we take this energy, how do we take you on this call, and make sure that India is one of the key leaders globally for the international standard for open source compliance? The leadership for this will fundamentally come from the United States, China, India, Japan, and Korea. Perhaps in that order today, fluctuating over time. What you do will be immensely important. What you do will be incredibly informative. And what you identify as needing improvement in areas like our resource materials, or indeed as simple as our website, is going to be tremendously useful. So I will be staying on this call for a while. I'll be there in the background to support and ask. I will have to disappear at some point because occasionally I need sleep. But I do want to hear as much of this conversation as possible. And I do hope that you, as the audience, feel free to engage with this conversation today, just like all the other OpenChain conversations. Everything we do in OpenChain is you. It means that it's not simply some knowledgeable speakers talking to an audience. The knowledge is you, and the conversation is two-way. Every time someone is talking, feel free to interrupt and ask questions. Every time you've got something to say, please do. We're all learning an incredible amount. And the momentum we've got from this fact that user companies are making a user company solution has been tremendous. We could have never accomplished this without this dialogue structure. Now, if there's a question you want to address to me outside of this call, outside of this event, just email me. But I encourage you to ask questions openly and freely. I assure you that every question has a basis in the past. Everyone in every geography has asked all types of questions, and the only thing we've ever done is benefit. Don't feel shy. Don't hesitate, and please do help us make sure that the only standard for open source compliance is as easy for as many people as possible to understand. This is solving a challenge that has lain still for decades. And by doing so, we're going to enable so many people to do a lot more with open source with more confidence. That's it for me. The story is you. And I'd like to hand over here to our organizers to take it to the next conversation and the next stage.
Thank you, Shane. You've said right into the discussion and given us a lot of food for thought. I would like to remind our participants that we can't recognize a lot of you, so we request all of you to use identifiable names once again. Moving forward, our next speaker is Mishi Chaudhary. Mishi is the founder and managing partner of MCA. She is also the managing partner of Moglen and Associates, New York, and legal director at Software Freedom Law Center, New York. She is the primary legal representative of many of the world's most significant free software developers and non-profit distributors. She is also the founder of SFLC.in, which is the premier non-profit organization representing the rights of internet users and free software developers in India. She consults with and advises established businesses and startups using free software in their products and service offerings in the US, Europe, India, China, and Korea. Mishi is a member of the Bar Council of Delhi, licensed to appear before the Supreme Court of India or the State High Court of India in the state of New York and before the Southern District of New York. Mishi is one of the most prolific voices in the free and open source software community, and we're very glad to have you, Mishi. Over to you.
Thank you, Kushagra. There's just a lot of titles which really don't mean anything, but thank you, Shane, for setting the context of why this meeting has happened. I know I'm supposed to stick to a presentation. I'm supposed to talk about free and open source software and ancillary rights, and thereafter we'll open for the discussion. But I do want to reiterate first that thank you all for joining. Arun has created a LinkedIn group, as he tells me, and perhaps there's a WhatsApp group also. There's an email chain. My strong desire is for all of us to come together in India and ensure that as we discuss our OpenChain specifications, the conformance, and what is happening in that world, we all can also come together to exchange information, ideas, and clarify the doubts which each of us has in this working group. The idea of having today's meeting was, as we move forward, is to set a clear agenda for the future, to ensure that there is a roadmap which all of us can follow, so that we can benefit from each other's knowledge as well as the exchange of ideas. I personally am not a very big fan of this one-way communication in the webinar system. This is a little odd anyway, and I'm sure each of you has been forced to attend to many of these webinars. So I am not going to be using any slides so that I don't bore you to death or add another boring webinar to what you are already facing. I hope all of you are in good health, and so are your loved ones. I hope you are armed with an actual specification that includes masks, sanitizers, and social distancing. My desire, as I said, to ensure is that our group gets into a rhythm of constant engagement, of exchange of ideas, questions and answers, so that we can ensure that all, as a start, that the companies as well as the participants do have an understanding of what we are trying to do. Later on, become conformance of the OpenChain specification, and thereby also start leading in the world in terms of setting the standards of how compliance happens. So more on that later, after I've talked a little about FOSS and ancillary rights. I know you all must want me to talk about containers, but that should happen for our next meeting. Everywhere I go, everybody wants to talk about containers these days, which is entirely understandable. So I'm going to talk a little bit something which is slightly different from what gets talked about in terms of licenses and markers of licenses. And please, Kushan, feel free to just stop me if I'm exceeding the time limit what you have set up. I would really like it to be more interactive and discussion-based, and thereafter, if people could turn on their videos, add their names, that would really be useful for all of us to call out and invite you in these discussions. So, as formally the topic was about free and open source software and ancillary rights. What I wanted to say was that distribution of free software involves sharing of computer programs, and mostly that is copyright law and governed by copyright law no matter where in the world you are, as long as the jurisdictions which we are talking about, like India, are signatories to the Berne Convention. Then what governs the use of this software is copyright law. But there are other legal rights also which involve trademark, patents, trade dress protection, protection against unfair competition, and some legal doctrines that are potentially involved. At the level of a single work, such as if you were to pick up like an Apache web server, which all of us are familiar with, or maybe a GCC. These ancillary legal rights, they don't really raise complex issues for nesting or what is the interaction between various components. But what happens in when hundreds or thousands of programs and associated files that contain documentation, that might contain configuration data, they're all combined into packages, and then they are aggregated into distributions, and that could be familiar to you, such as Ubuntu or a RHEL or a Fedora or a community distribution like Debian. The significance of these rights increases tremendously, and so does the complexity of the interaction between the different parts. How the trademark and other rights associated with those component packages, like of the Apache Software Foundation, interacts with the trademark or competition right of the distributors or the users or the manufacturers, such as Red Hat or Canonical or Debian. That cannot just be determined by understanding the copyright licenses. You can't just say, I know the Apache license, I know GPL, I know CTTL or Eclipse, now I know everything about it. Each party's trademark licensing policies, for example, will also affect the real rights and relations of these parties beyond the content of what is in the FOSS licenses. Now, my practice, particularly in the US, which is where many of the FOSS projects are headquartered, it does involve advising clients on the interaction of these rights and the difficulties that arise from their overlapping nature, especially as they travel between non-commercial parties to commercial parties. I would say, at least in our context in India, there is a lot of similarity between how the common law legal system works, how the basis of the trademark law or the copyright law mostly operate broadly. And that's why it helps to just have that understanding and think these are not two very, very different areas or jurisdictions we are talking about. Now, copyright licenses, they are both the primary legal regulation of users' rights and one of the ancillary rights for distribution makers also. But trademark, and most often what happens is that the understanding is this is a free and open source software project, or this is a piece of software which was distributed under one of the OSI or Free Software Foundation approved licenses. I am using it. Why are you making it so oppressive or so difficult or trivial to tell me what I can call or what I cannot call? And people's expectations mostly are that because it is a FOSS project or if it's distributed under one of those licenses, that the trademark policy should also be very liberal. I have had a lot of clients who've said, oh, I picked this up off the internet. I'm whitelisting everything and then selling it under my name because it is a FOSS license. Yeah, that sounds great, but that's not how law works. Most of these licenses do not have trademark terms in them, and even if they did, they're only giving us a little bit of a guidance about how the project thinks about those ideas. It doesn't tell us what the policies are. And that's why the difficulties that arise from these overlapping rights, they will occur at the transition between when a commercial party, such as some of your companies, will pick up something from a non-commercial project, which is a free and open source project. And thereafter, there would be policy drafting, enforcement strategies, and these difficulties have no analogous in conventional trademark practice. That's why if you go to a regular trademark lawyer, it is counterintuitive to them when we try to show them a FOSS project's licensing policy and how it operates and interacts with what with a commercial project's policies are. So when I said ancillary rights, I meant that there are distributions which have nested copyrights. So You will have to figure out whether some packages have certain licenses and the other packages have something else. And when all of them work together, what does that mean? As I said, I'm not touching on containers, but this definitely flows there, that what is in the user land, what is in the container space, how do these various licenses interact with each other, how do the various trademark policies interact with each other, what does that mean become extremely important. Now, just coming to trademark, the property right in the name given to the trademark holder is balanced by the fact that there is a social advantage. Why the trademark law exists is that I, as a consumer, think of something like Debian, or I think of something like Rare, or I think of some other thing which has come out, and I think, okay, here it is, there's a quality which this name conveys to me. And if something is called one of these marks, then I know that it will meet certain standards. So that is why the essence of trademark liability is the creation of confusion. Now, obviously, FOSS projects are not as belligerent in enforcement of their rights. If they are not Louis Vuitton, so you will never see a FOSS project being very aggressive in telling you this you can't or cannot do, but that doesn't mean that they don't have rights. And when they come to you and say you cannot call something the way you are trying to sell it, you have to listen to what their policies are. And this is becoming increasingly important in, say, for the object storage systems, for various other things which we are looking at now, because there also the policies are overlapping in the commercial as well as non-commercial space. So now descriptive names can be trademarks only to the extent that descriptive names have acquired some secondary meaning. You've used this Kleenex a lot of times, but it is not really Kleenex, it's just another tissue, but it has become genericized through the process of broad social use. Because everybody started calling it Kleenex, that means it became generic, that means the secondary meaning which was associated with this particular producer of paper in which I am blowing my nose or has evaporated over time. Now, unlike copyrights, the trademark rights are defeated if you do not protect your mark and if you fail to protect them. So if a trademark owner's failure to prevent confusion can lead to loss of rights. That means that the trademark owner is required by law not only to maintain registrations, but they're also required to take some measures to police their marks. That is why you see trademark enforcement often occurs in situations that you might think, wow, why is this person bothering so much? It's so trivial, it's so oppressive, why are they after everybody? But the idea is that either if they don't control it so closely, they will lose the rights, it will either become generic, or when they go to courts, the courts are going to say, you never bothered to really tell everybody that you can't use it in a certain way. Now you have lost those rights. And that's why we require them to police their marks. This is also called something in law, which you will come across, which is called naked licensing, in which if projects don't have policies, if companies don't have clear and explicit policies about usage of trademark, and people go about using them in whatever way they like, then the term comes up that you nakedly license them. And that's why you've lost whatever protection you have. So the rules that determine that what names can be used for modified versions of FOSS programs are not found in your FOSS licenses. You pick up any of the licenses which OSI has asked or Free Software Foundation has approved of. You might find some reference in that, but that is not the term which tells you how a trademark right will have to be used. Now, the licensor's primary incentive is to prevent the quality assumptions that have been built into the marks from being deprecated downstream. In the beginning, I talked about the fact that there is a quality associated. If something is called Apache, if something is called Free Software Foundation, if something is called OpenChain, you have come to understand that OpenChain has a specification. OpenChain's conformance must have actually complied with what is provided in those specifications. That's why it is now becoming a standard which is going to be recognized internationally. Something else called by OpenChain, it won't, if it doesn't do the same thing. Your association invokes certain kind of understanding and quality assurance with the name, but it doesn't happen when you actually come across something else which is using that name. That is where the clash becomes a problem. Now, this incentive prevents the projects and packages from being as permissive in trademark licensing as they are in their copyright licensing. And that's why the modified versions are required to be so designated. You take a FOSS project, downstream, if you are modifying it, you are required to provide some kind of an indication that your version is a modified version. Your version is not an individual, not the version as it came to you. But that may be sufficient in some copyright licenses. But if, for example, there is a program X whose name is trademarked by its author, it's modified downstream, and the modifications, even if they are properly designated in the source code, as is required by the license, it does not put at ease the minds of the X project's developers if the modifications contain some serious bugs. And that will cause users of this modified X to experience some kind of harm. This will deprecate X's reputation for quality, and that's why X project's trademark policy could require that modification patch sets should be reviewed by X's developers before they will license use of trademark X as the name of the modified version. So next time you pick up a project or you pick up a package or something else, just because it is under a FOSS license, that does go, and don't assume that you can just use whatever the name has been designated. Go read its trademark policy. There might be certain things which are required. Either it gives you guidance about the fact that if you're using it for a non-profit purpose, you might be free to use it, but not always. If you are using it for a commercial purpose, which must be the case for several of you, considering in your companies how you use them, then they require special permission. If you are modifying it, all the more reason that you will have to use the license, you will have to get license for the use of the trademark, and you will not be able to use it as modified in the way it is provided. So that's a little bit about the trademarks part of it. Now, the copyright and the nested part of the ancillary right gets at a level when we are talking about distributions, which are compilations of various kind of software packages which exist. Now that depends on how the law designates them, but just remember three things I would say in order to not get it too complicated. That if it is a copyleft license, which is if it's a family of GPL or AGPL or LGPL licenses, no matter what version, always remember the EULA that you will wrap around it. It cannot impose more restrictive conditions on the use of those software packages. That's the first thing. The second thing is that also the EULA cannot prohibit things like what a GPL license allows for. The third thing is that GPL does not allow for sub-licensing certain structures. So you might want to review your contracts, your service contracts in your agreements about whether there is copyleft licensing or not. And the fourth thing I will say is that a lot of times it will happen that you may be distributing your package under a permissive license, say for example an MIT or a PISTI, and you think that the EULA is now making it far more restrictive than you wanted it, or it's calling it by some completely different name. That is allowed because you made it under a permissive license, and permissive license terms don't do anything to prevent the EULA from imposing much more restrictive terms. Now that's, in a nutshell, I know that's a lot of legal information, and it is better always to get legal information when it is with respect to some specific questions that you might have, rather than this random stuff I have thrown at you. So feel free to ask those questions. I'm happy to answer them. Obviously, as a lawyer, I have to disclaim everything just because a random question is asked and I do not know facts. Mostly, I will say it depends, but I will try to give some kind of a guidance about where to look, what to ask your legal team. How and why I decided to talk about these issues here, especially when we are talking about OpenChain, is because if you look at the specification document, it does talk about open source policy, it talks about license policies, etc. And when we are trying to get that confirmation, then we must ensure that our legal team also understands something very basic, as that just the fact that it's a copyright license does not mean it is also covering patent terms or trademark terms. Kushagra is sending me a zillion messages to say that I've exceeded my time. So I am going to end it here and stop your boredom, but I hope the discussion is much more interesting later on. Thank you.
So, Nishi, would you like to take questions right now, or we can take it during the open discussion?
Let's go Arun's presentation and then we can all have a discussion together.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that. So, thank you, Nishi. That was very insightful, and we now have a better idea about how to move forward. So, our next speaker is Arun Alakan. Arun leads the open source software license compliance activities at Siemens Healthineers. He's an active member of multiple open source communities that focus on developing open source based tools for open source compliances. So Arun, as many of you may already know, is a very well-known figure in the industry, and we're very glad to have him with us. Over to you, Arun.
Hi, thanks Kushagra for that intro, and hi everyone.
Yeah.
So I hope my audio and video, if possible, is clear, because this is kind of the de facto question whenever I start a presentation. So I might need to share my screen here. Yes. Hope you can see my screen. Do you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yes, Arun. We can see it.
Yeah. So I think in the last in the first meetup of OpenChain India working group, I had gone through a detailed presentation on the various Toolchain and tooling groups. So I have just reused few slides from them and just touch upon what we use at Siemens Healthineers for our open source compliance practice, and also a slide on just a few pointers on how we want to take this group ahead and define a roadmap and what all we can do as a community to add value to the whole all the members. So and also I have an interactive a slide, in the sense you might need to log into menti.com, and I would share a passcode so that you can answer the question, and so we get an anonymous feedback on few of the questions. So I would go to that at the end of my slides. And so to start with, recently, maybe in the month of June, we had Siemens Healthineers. I'm having a difficulty in the slide thing. It is not moving. Just a minute. Yes. So Siemens Healthineers recently got compliant or renewed its conformance to the latest format of the OpenChain specification, that is the 2.0. And it is really important for us as an organization to be compliant with the latest standard. And we are the first company specialized in medical technology to announce the conformance worldwide. So this is quite important to us, and OpenChain is really important, and we ensure that we have a very good participation in terms of community activities, which is spearheaded by OpenChain. Namely, we are quite active with the open source tooling group, and we also started contributing to certain compliance tools. That meaning that we have a dedicated person working for us who would, try to fix bugs, and we design or we analyze certain requirements, and we roll out certain features, and we discuss that with the community, and based on the maintainers and the community's interest, we merge those changes back to upstream. So through this, we are also ensuring that we are being a good citizen in the open source community, thereby actively participating and also contributing it back to the community. And at the management level, this is quite important, and this has been underlined by our top management. For example, recently the CTO of Siemens Healthineers has shared this news of OpenChain conformance in LinkedIn, and the important fact to look at it is he encourages our suppliers to follow our path. So this could be the norm going ahead, so that we are going to make this a very important point or a prerequisite for to be a Siemens Healthineers supplier who supplies software or any other things to Siemens. So this could probably be in our checklist in coming forward or in the future time, and especially also our India managing director also shares this, and which reiterates the importance of the compliance activity, which is in line with OpenChain. So going forward, we so just most probably you would be aware of this, so I just included this link to the global mailing list and the India working group mailing list here in the slide, so that you can have a look into it. And we use the Sharing Creates Value GitHub repository to host a lot of information regarding to the compliance reference toolchain. So there is a lot of activity going on in the tooling group, where we have meetings every second Wednesday in a month, and you can join this call. There are two calls happening, one adhering to the European morning time and also the European evening time, so that people from all around the globe can join according to their convenience. So please join these mailing lists in case you are not yet there, and this would really give a lot of hints to a lot of questions that we have, and we could discuss with our community and come up with solutions. So moving on to Healthineers, we have this big picture as an integrated. So we are looking into implement an integrated compliance tool chain rather than having these tools remain as independent entities and creating silos or islands in the whole process. So we are trying to align our process according to the company's development team CI/CD processes, and we try to map the whole process in this picture. This is somewhat we have defined in the tooling group, and based on the requirement, we have also identified certain tool sets that can be used for all of these use cases. So this next image, for each use case, we can use a certain set of tools or a combination of tools that through which we can ensure our requirements are met. So we have been in Healthineers, we have been trying out a few additional tools in addition to Software 360 and Fuzzology, which is also maintained by Siemens and Bosch together. So in addition to that, in the CI/CD process, we are trying to also plug in OpenSource Review Toolkit and Antenna. So we use Fuzzology for our license or component scanning purpose for all the open source components that are identified being used in the project is subjected to a Fuzzology scan, and the corresponding report is brought down, and this is archived. And from this report, we use this report and the corresponding artifacts to generate the final output that is usually accompany our applications in the form of README OSS and copyright list, etc. So Fuzzology forms the most important tool in our compliance toolchain, and we use Eclipse Software 360 as a catalog application where all of these requested components are stored, and we have a project level setup where all of these components, according to the usage, can be cataloged, and this is a one-stop shop for the project to check on the usage of components, its obligations, and also we have other interactions with other tools within our organization, especially the ones that we use for software vulnerability management, and also some relevance in terms of the export control and other things. So main tools, as a catalog we use Software 360, and as a scanner we use Fuzzology. So in addition to that, recently we have been conducting a lot of tests and pilot things with the OSS Review Toolkit, which itself is a complete package which you can implement as the single tool for your compliance. But we are using also it has a modular approach where you can use important modules that is really important to you. So it can be termed as toolkit. So from the available whole package, we use only analyzer and a downloader to use in our CI/CD process to analyze the packages used and download their corresponding sources, and then it is integrated and brought down to Software 360 in an automated way. So for that for the communication between OSS Review Toolkit and the Software 360, we use Software 360 Antenna, which is also a Eclipse project, which has the capacity to convert the results from open source review toolkit and communicate it to Software 360 and create entries and set projects in the way you want to have your project configured. So these are the main 4 tools that we are currently using at Healthineers, and so this forms our core set of toolchain. And recently we have also been trying out the turn tool for inspecting the metadata and package information for container images. So this is also a real requirement of these times, and we are quite intrigued on testing the tool for its usage. Until now, we have not used it, extensively to come up with some results, but for certain projects we have been using this. So by this, I think I would conclude the list of tools that I'm using. So next I would go to this adding value to the community part. So if all of you can join this menti.com website, if you can open it in your browser and enter the first code written there, that is 11, 21, 96 and 7. Can you tell me whether this is accessible to you? Hello?
Yeah, it's available.
Yeah, okay. So do you see my first question there? Like, I use the following OSS tools in my organization. So you can just click on it. It's a multiple choice question. So if you all can log in your answers, then we could get a feel of how this community is distributed in terms of tool usage, so that we can decide the next steps based on the results.
This is so cool.
Yeah, because I recently came across this tool in one of our organization presentation. So the good thing is it is anonymous, so we don't have a
Yeah.
fear of So,
By the way, everyone, Arun has been just so intensely involved in the OpenChain project for ages. I mean, Siemens Healthineers conformance is a big deal, but even more so, what can I say? Thank you for all of your contributions. It's been amazing.
yeah, thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure. Yeah. So what do you see in the screen? It's the results. Do you see here? Do you see the results slide with the graph?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe I'll just move to the next slide. I will just take a snapshot of this.
Yes, please do, because we want to show people this later so we can get kind of an understanding of how the market's playing out.
Yes. So I'm moving on to the next question. Sorry for the delay. I'm just new to this, and my current setup is okay. Yes. So the next question is: I use the following proprietary tools in my organization.
I'm now curious what the 13% others are.
Yeah. So maybe this could be a point like we could have a follow up on we can collect this information.
This is a great question. Yeah. This is good.
Because in the past I have tried to initiate kind of capturing this information in a survey and other things, but it was not well received because of people having thoughts about the compliance or how their information will be. So when I came to know about this feature, I was just trying out. So that is the reason why I have to have multiple codes, because the free version of this tool only allows me to have 2 questions per presentation. But the good thing is we have unlimited presentations. So that means if I have 10 questions, then I need to have 5 codes. Yeah, so I think now we have almost the similar respondents for the previous question, that is like almost 25 people. So if this is okay, then okay.
Let's capture this also.
Yes, so I think the numbers are still going higher than the one. Okay, I'm just taking a snapshot. Okay, so maybe now I would ask you to log in with the next code That is the second one. If you refresh and go back to menti.com and do the second code, that is 52, 14, 95, and 4. So this question is is a kind of a hint how to decide our future steps. So just only have two questions. It is, how do you want to engage with the community, where you can enter three answers. Like it could be like just one word answers through meetups, online meetups, webinars, whatever you like, so that it gives us a feeling of, and the results show as a word cloud, and it gives us a feeling of how the community thinks in real time. And we have a multiple choice question for the frequency of the meetings that we need to do. So, yeah, there is one. You can actually enter your results in multiple times. Okay, it's working. So also try if you need hands-on session with tools. If that is a requirement, please put it up if you think it is useful. And personally, one thing I feel that we need is also maybe a dedicated session for answering some legal questions. In the sense, we are not seeking answers to a particular issue, but if something is in a general way, like this one which Mishi had done today, a certain topic. So if that could be one stream, this would be really useful. Personally, I cannot log in that because I am doing this. So personally, that is my opinion. Yeah. So we have a few more minutes. There is already 17 people who have logged in their opinions. I would request others also to participate so that we make use of this. How many participants do we have in the call right now?
38.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we do have a lot of response in that way. Almost 30 people. Okay. So just let me know when we can call it off, and then I think let's go for the 38 also. If I get 38 responses. So I don't know whether the number is right because the responses can be multiple times. So I think we can take a snapshot right now. Yeah. So coming back to the slide where, so this exercise that was dedicatedly for point number 2, understand the community better. So we can have a lot of future things also in this regard, and we have to identify areas where we can share these best practices. We can think of creating a knowledge base on various tools and practices. We can conduct online workshops, and we can conduct physical meetups. That is a start, because I don't know when this time is going to end. So if there is a post-COVID time, we could think about physical meetups. So also I would request all the others in the call to actively participate, because as a community, I feel we are not that connected, because very rarely, I think only when OpenChain came into the picture, at least we got a chance to meet outside our organizations and get in touch with other community members. So I would suggest, please be very active with the LinkedIn group, share your articles, share your questions. it's actually like it's as Shane mentioned, it's you are the knowledge. So please do share whatever you like, and please keep communicating in WhatsApp and all the other platforms possible, and we can together decide a roadmap and then take this forward. Because as I see with the other regional groups in OpenChain, I see a lot of value being added when people are working together as a community. A lot of questions are getting answered in a shorter time. There are solutions on the table, so it is always helpful for all of us if we participate and promote this group. So please share it with your colleagues and get in touch with me in case if you need any kind of support or help regarding the group. And if you have something to share, say for example, if you would like to take a session or anything, just put a post in the group and then let's take it up from there. So I would also request some volunteers who can come forward to support me in maintaining this group, so that it is not just me here managing the stuff or access restricting access or anything.
Arun, sorry.
Yeah.
Arun, sorry to interrupt, but we have exceeded the time limit considerably.
Yeah, fine.
So if you could just summarize, we can quickly move to the next step.
Yeah. So I just summarized it. It is my final slide, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in this session, MCA and Shane, and yeah, that's all from my side. So if you have any questions, just let me know. You can now we can communicate via WhatsApp or LinkedIn group or whichever channel you prefer. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Arun. Just one point, Arun.
Thank you.
Here.
Oh, is Anupam on the call?
Yes. So as you want participation to help you out, I'm there. You can add for the community purpose.
Yeah, I will surely do. So just to maybe I need to introduce Anupam here. So Anupam is the part of the development team who maintains Pathology and Software 360. So he works for Siemens here from Bangalore. So if anybody is using Pathology and Software 360, and if you have questions, you have a face to now to ask questions and get it solved, much more faster.
Great. Thank you, Arun. It's always great to have a perspective from the industry. It helps us understand the concept better. So we now move on to the open discussion segment. We are going to be discussing the adoption and implementation of OpenChain standards in India, challenges and the way forward. And this is going to be moderated by Machine. So this segment is a lot about exchange of ideas, debates and discussion, and a question and answer session. So we would like to give everyone an opportunity to speak, and to ensure that for a smooth flow of the discussion, we will have to follow some rules. So anybody who wishes to speak is requested to raise their hands, and the moderator will give them a chance to speak. We also very politely request people to not interrupt when somebody else is speaking, and be very brief with their comments, questions. With that, we can begin. Mishi, we'll start with the discussion.
Sure. Thank you. I think Arun did a fantastic job of the polling and set out what we were planning to do in this session anyway. My view was that the first two meetings of the OpenChain working group were these warm-up exercises in terms of just getting to know each other, feeling a little more comfortable about who is doing what. And as Shane said, that the interesting thing about other countries' working groups have been that companies and private parties who are generally a little hesitant to share what they're using in-house, they became comfortable and trying to figure out what common resources can be spread out. And my endeavor was exactly this, to hold this discussion, to first see what people want to do. And Arun already did that in terms of, Arun, you have the screenshot of what people wanted, whether it is WhatsApp interactions or webinars or personal, the various, that word cloud which came up, which perhaps takes us to the first thing as an agenda item which I wanted here was that if people have these various ways, Arun has created a LinkedIn group. I am given to understand there's already a WhatsApp group, so I think in between those, how do people feel if they can be added to those groups where regularly resources can be posted, discussions can be had. But before we come to that, I really wanted to understand that if webinars or online meetups is something which people prefer, not only because it is the pandemic time and it's very difficult to meet in person, but also because people are spread out all over the country, and it may not be always possible just to be in Bangalore, although majority of us might be there. But I'm hoping that more and more people from the rest of the country will also be joining. So if online meetups are convenient, and if people think that we can have similar webinars or online meetups, how often do you think we should have those? Should we fix a time monthly, like an hour-long session, or should we do it quarterly? How do we do that? That's my first question.
Mishi, actually, I had that question as a poll, but I forgot.
That's okay. You and I are on same page, so that's great.
Yeah. So, if you want, I can share it and we can get the answers right away, if that is okay.
Sure. If you have that question, and if the choices are monthly, quarterly, and whatever other choice you want to add, let's go ahead. And if anybody wants to weigh in, please, in your settings there is a raise your hand option. Please go ahead, raise it so that we can see and you can speak. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Otherwise, he's putting up a question, and we will have a poll and a colorful bar graph.
Yeah, do you see the poll?
Oh, that's a lot. I don't think weekly or bi-weekly I can do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I just put it for the sake of options. So.
Okay. Getting there.
So the only competition is between monthly and quarterly.
Yeah, I think weekly, bi-weekly is too ambitious.
Yes. Oh.
Ooh. There are people who lie.
Yeah.
Which is the link for the poll?
No, the passcode would be the same one that you use for the word cloud. So if you go there, you will see this poll there.
Oh, maybe people logged out.
I'm completely lost with the link.
Maybe we need it again.
Yeah. Can you put it in the chat?
Okay. The passcode is.
What is the web page?
It's on the screen.
It's menti.com. It's menti.com.
Okay. Oh my God! Look at that. 10% are saying bi-weekly. You're crazy.
Can you imagine? I love the enthusiasm.
Yeah. So the second for 5214954 is the passcode.
521494. Is that right?
Yeah, 5214954.
954.
Actually, you can see the code in the top of the results.
All right. Exciting.
Okay, so I think, still okay. It is not done yet. So, okay, now the quarterly is closing in.
That's amazing. Monthly is ahead. That's incredible. This is why the Indian economy is just skyrocketing.
We wish.
In Japan, we're like, oh yeah, once every 3 months is fine.
Okay. So we have 27 respondents for this poll right now.
We don't have everyone.
Yeah. Okay. I guess maybe we have the clear indication that is a monthly meeting. Maybe we could start with the monthly meetings, and if needed, we can reassess this at a later point of time.
That sounds great. I mean, we saw in Japan, I think we're on bi-monthly right now, but the tooling meeting meets bi-weekly. So, monthly sounds doable if people like it. Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm only concerned is that not many people, there are few people who have not yet weighed in, but we could do that.
So, go ahead.
It could end up being like one of the OpenChain global bi-weekly webinars on the third Monday. Once or twice we've had like 4 people turn up, and it's like, well, it's good to have a conversation.
Yeah. So I am freezing the results now.
Okay, I think that most people are in favor of monthly. Why don't we start from September onwards, and then in November or December we weigh where we are. And if it's doable, if it's not doable, let's do it for 3 months, September, October, November, and then we'll keep it short. We won't keep it very long. We can keep it 60 minutes to start with, and then we can weigh in again about where we want to go, how we want to go. So my other, now that Arun has a tool, there are preferences for people. I would say maybe a Friday or a Thursday is good. If what people have preferences, I believe 60 minutes is enough. Let's start with that, and then we could keep it on a Monday or a Friday, or which works for people in terms of not interfering with their work days, or if they have other opinions about it.
Yeah, I think that should work, and maybe regarding the topics that to be discussed, maybe we can have these kind of polls posted in the LinkedIn group.
Yes.
And then invite topics, and then we maybe just 5 days before the event we can finalize on the agenda, something like that.
Yes, let's not keep that very crowdsourced. Whatever people post in, what we think are interesting things people would like to talk about, based on that we will pick up. I would also really like if we could spread out. It's not the same people who are always weighing in, and each of you can come in. That would be an interesting thing. If it's all right, we'll keep it at 60 minutes. We will talk for the 30 minutes in terms of presentations or something, like 15 minutes each, or 10 minutes each also, if that is workable, whatever people prefer. But dedicate at least half the time to just having discussions about where we are going. I do have one question. Do people prefer the LinkedIn group to be the default, or people would prefer the mailing list? My preference is usually mailing list, but I am the free software enthusiast who doesn't like to give my data to anybody. But I don't count. So, what is people's preference?
My suggestion, we should stick to the mailing list and use the LinkedIn group as a place to communicate and not discuss. Maybe just to seek opinions and provide feedback, and a place to come together. And discussions shall be routed through the mailing list as we do it for the global ones. I would prefer that.
So does that mean that's both the things? Because some of the things are on the mailing list and some are on LinkedIn?
What I meant is we can decide, like, technical topics like as a discussion or something, we can have the mailing list as the primary one, and if some kind of a promotion in the sense like more people need to look into, maybe we can talk about it for something. The group would have a much more curated information, but the mailing list would be a place for anything and anyone to post.
Other people have opinions? Please weigh in.
Yes, there are.
I know that anonymously participating in polls is very attractive, but this is only about logistics. So if others, we can hear from others, that would be great.
Also post it on the chat window.
Personally, I like mailing lists as a core because it means we can go back and check what we discussed quite easily, where LinkedIn is a bit harder. And as an international standard, we are in a situation where in 10 years, Tata Group might say, when did this document start with the Indian work group? And it'd be great if the mailing list was the source of truth as such, because then we'll know that in 10 or 20 years, it's perfectly accessible.
Yes, others?
I'm Shubha. My opinion is to have a LinkedIn because that has room for growth, for expansion. And mailing list can be specific questions rather.
That's a really good point. I mean, we do similar with what we call the specification mailing list, where we use the mailing list as the source of key actions, like, oh, we're going to make this document, or we're going to update the specification. But, all across the OpenChain project, in work groups, in other places, in social media, other conversations happen. So, I don't think that we should turn off LinkedIn. I just think it might be possible to balance, key outcomes are here, recorded mailing list, but other stuff can be used for growth.
Okay, Shubha, thank you. Others?
Yeah, I think, Mishi, there are some, many of the people have written their preference in the chat also. So I think it's mostly I can see mailing list. And yes, so I would say mailing list the primary and the LinkedIn secondary can be.
Yes.
That one.
Okay, great. I just saw the chat window. It lit up now. I think let's do a combination for now, and then we can see. There is a LinkedIn group. We'll also, because we have Kushagra has the data for whoever has logged in, we'll send out the information on the LinkedIn group also. But we'll primarily maintain the mailing list so that it's an email server. People host it themselves sometimes. People at least have more control over it. We do not know who LinkedIn would be sold next to. So, but anyway, we will keep the group open, like Shubha said, like Arun, you said, that sometimes it's just interesting to have interactions like that, which might be informal, or to expand, as Shubha was pointing out. So we'll keep it, but that would be a secondary thing. We'll have a primary one. We are right now aiming at a monthly discussion, and we'll perhaps send a poll or something about proposing which dates work for people later on. Arun does not have a ready-made poll for everything, but we'll send out one very soon to everyone on the mailing list as well as the LinkedIn group to figure out what days work for everybody, and we'll fix that particular day each month, and we will do it for the next 3 months, 60 minutes, and then we will weigh how it is going, what does the community feel again in December, whether we wish to continue the monthly meetings, whether we want to turn them into quarterly, or if we are feeling very enthusiastic, we want to do a bi-monthly. I'm not sure that in 3 months we would decide it's bi-weekly, but who knows? And so I'm just recapitulating whatever we have discussed so far. And that's perhaps will be a follow-up here. I also say, do people have opinions? As I said, if my personal feeling is we spend a lot of time discussing. Everybody, each month, someone different makes a short presentation, 10-15 minutes, and agenda can be decided very close to the meeting. We don't have to decide beforehand based on what people have been discussing on the mailing list, in the LinkedIn group, or new developments that have happened. Based on that, we'll curate something, and maybe there are a few questions which people want to send beforehand, and then we could answer those also. If there are legal questions, general advice, obviously I can always provide, or other people can weigh in. Those can be sent beforehand, and based on that, we'll actively manage for a little while. Arun is there, Anirudh is there, MCA Kushagra is there. We will try to coordinate in that sense, at least in the beginning, and thereafter, hopefully, more volunteers would join. If I have captured everything so far, or if you think I have missed something, or there is something burning question or comment or anything you have to say, or even if you have to say that, oh, this has been a complete waste of my time, or you have to say, no, this has been a lovely thing. Anything you want to say, it would be great if people want to weigh.
I think it's been awesome. I mean, even though it's like 10:30 here at night, I'm happy.
We've kept you. It's so engaged that you can't leave your screen.
I couldn't. Right. I had to stay here the whole time. That's good, right?
Others? I can only see letters and boxes, but I'm hoping people are still here.
Yes, I think there are a lot of fellow Jitsters here. Or I'm not sure.
Well, you know, in the OpenChain project globally, we have a rule that silence means absolute agreement.
Santosh would like to speak. Yes, please, Santosh, unmute yourself. Thank you. And please go ahead.
I find this group interesting. I think it will be more exciting to listen to what and all are the topics that we will be further discussing. Right now, I mean, this group, I could see that even legal as well as the engineers are together going to have discussions, and really I find it could be more interesting.
Santosh, could you please give a short introduction for yourself? So that...
Sure. So I'm working for Conduent. I work for this compliance process. I lead them in Conduent. So my background is like I'm a computer science graduate, as well as I've done a post-graduation diploma in property rights. So so the conversations here is a combination of them. So I find it interesting. Yeah. So that is in short about me.
Yeah, Santosh, you're based out of Bangalore?
No, I'm currently working in Hyderabad. Yeah, I worked for Bangalore earlier, but currently I'm in Hyderabad. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we have a well representation in terms of regional places. I guess apart from Bangalore, there should now Hyderabad is there. Is there anybody from Chennai, Pune? Because I think some of my colleagues from Pune should be there, and any other places.
Yes, Arun, actually, and Shubha, and we are from myself, and Patrick joined, and we are from Chennai.
Oh, okay, nice.
Oh, great. So, Shubha, where do you work?
I work for Technical Credit Home India, and I mean, again, I'm a software engineer, and then became an architect, and then moved to compliance, and now I perform the role of OSS consultant at the company, and then ensure open source compliance in products of technical.
Okay, great.
Somebody else was also raising.
Yeah, Anirudh is, I think it's Anirudh is who I can see. Or no, Arun, are you raising your hand?
Oh, sorry, I was just checking if there was a window for somebody saying.
Yes, somebody has a name. I think it's Achu.
Yeah. Hi.
Please introduce yourself. Go ahead, because others may not know you. So please
Sure.
go ahead and speak.
Yeah, my name is Achyut. I work in Cognizant, so I'm working in Cognizant Open Source Compliance team, and I am based out of Hyderabad. So I'm so glad that we are discussing this, and you raised out this point that it should be virtual meetings from now. And I'm so happy that this pandemic has created an opportunity to meet, and it has forced everyone to meet online, and now we got to know the importance of this. Because last time when it was in Bangalore, I couldn't travel physically to Bangalore, and then I tried, I think with MCA, there was someone called Gurpreet. I tried with him connectly, and I couldn't. There was some issue and I couldn't, and I missed this. So now I am so happy that from now on, I saw the presentation, Arun, where you mentioned more physical meetups. Okay, and then I wanted to raise that point, no, let it be more virtual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So helpful.
Absolutely, this is great, and that's why I think it would be very interesting if, like Shubha said, they've joined it from Chennai, and we are from Hyderabad. Now you were joining, so it's. I personally completely agree with you. That's why I can join from New York. Otherwise, I am always left out. So.
Great, thanks a lot, guys. So I think this is a good point.
Yeah, maybe. I just want to propose something like, because we just had a few introductions, so maybe in order to make the group active, so why don't we do a short introduction and getting to know each other in the LinkedIn group. So all of you who have joined, so that maybe we can exchange, just a brief introduction and say hi to all in the group, so that it would trigger the activity in the group itself before even any serious topics being discussed. So just a suggestion, if you're open to it, then we can do it.
Yeah, that'll be great. Please, everybody, send your introductions, and that's a great idea. We will all get to know. I think Raju wanted to say something. So Raju, if you could make it quick and.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is the first time I'm attending an OpenChain meetup, and it felt really good. All the sessions by Mishri, by Arun were really good. In future, I would like to see more sessions, more hands-on sessions where we could explore actual deployment of OpenChain or in companies or organizations. I would like to see more of that happening. So that is one of the things. The session went great. Hoping to get more active here often.
Great, thank you, Raju. Kushagra, how are we doing on time?
We've exceeded the time by 10 minutes. So, but that's okay, doing best.
Okay, great. Abhay, please go ahead.
Hello everyone. Okay, my camera is stuck, so I'm unable to launch the camera. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm based out of Bangalore, and I have recently started in the field of FOSS compliance, and I'm currently working in BOSS. In my past experience, I was a software engineer, and the session which were held by the Mishri, I was trying to hold a grab, but a few of the things I completely missed out of it, since those were from the legal part. But I could really connect with the Arun's session. I could understand all those technicalities he was trying to say, because it was a really great and informative session for me, and I'm hoping to attend these meetings every month and try to learn from everyone what the current happening and going in the field of FOSS. So I'm really looking forward for it.
Great, thank you, Abhay. I think it is by design that lawyers try to keep things complicated. But sorry, but it was my failure. I think it's also, I personally have to say that some of the legal concepts, especially in our area, are a little slightly complicated. So that's not just you, that's also me. So hopefully over the next few months we will be able to simplify. And Arun is a better presenter than I am, obviously. So thank you for joining. And we look forward that you will be here every month. And as Raju said, and also earlier, Arun had insisted as well, rightly so. I think it would be very interesting that we circulate and hear from different speakers and different people about what they are doing in their companies. Like I personally would be very keen on understanding how Fossology is used for export control scans. And because it's a very jurisdictional issue, it's a very legal issue also. It depends on what product, how many components, etc. That's a really interesting part of it. So there are various details which we might be able to explore next time. I think I will try to wrap this up to say we have thankfully at least met the agenda about deciding about our next meeting. I am quite excited that we will be meeting virtually from now onwards every month. We will be hearing from different people. We'll definitely make sure that at least 30 minutes or half the time or whatever we are meeting is allocated to more discussions. Please send in your introductions to the LinkedIn group once you've received information. If you've not already been added to the group, we will be sending it out on the mailing list. Please send in your questions, queries, comments. If you have legal questions, Arun already said that I'm supposed to give general advice at least, even if I promise I will not send a bill. I will not say it depends, but it actually does depend on what your facts are. And you don't want to sue me later for malpractice. Although I'm staying in Trump land, so I will also behave like him, deny everything.
It works.
But thank you for joining us, and thank you for participating. It has been absolute pleasure. I think before the year ends that most of us here, our companies would be conformants, and we would be then setting the standards for the rest of the world to follow, and exchanging more details about what does this mean, what does compliance mean, what does it actually mean for a company, what policies mean, what legal question means, and also telling people around us that it is not as complicated as some people would like everybody else to believe. There's enough good work which is happening, and the world is open source and we all just live in it. So Kushag, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mishi, and thanks to all the participants for having this engaging and intriguing discussion and for setting the agenda for our future meetings. So I know all of you have had a long day. We are nearly towards the end of our event. I would now like to invite Prashant Sugathan for giving concluding remarks. Prashant is the Principal Associate at MCA. He is an engineer turned lawyer who has worked closely with the free software community over the years. Prashant is also a very well-known digital rights activist. I must add that Prashant has been instrumental in organizing this meetup and the previous two MCA OpenChain meetups that we had organized last year. And therefore, it's only fitting that we hear from Prashant as we scale towards the end of this remarkable set of conversations we've had. Prashant, over to you.
Thanks, Kushagra. I mean, without doubt, I think this has been the best event that we had till now, going by the number of attendees. And thanks for deciding to organize virtual sessions from now on. I think the amount of time that I spent in this session, I have spent the last two sessions traveling from the Bangalore airport to the meetup venues. So that way, thanks a lot for deciding to hold virtual events. Okay. So, Kushagra's talked about my involvement with the free software community. The entire spirit of the free software movement is about sharing knowledge. I believe that is something that we as a group can imbibe. These meetups should be about sharing knowledge, how we all can work together. Let's have more sessions like one that Arun gave so that we can understand how each of our organizations, each of the companies, the partners may work. with on OpenChain with the various tools, etc. If you look at the software development companies in India, I mean, the companies have like always tried to do their best by being explained, whether it is CMMI or let's say ISO. So definitely, I'm sure OpenChain have a, with respect to OpenChain compliance. So yes, there's a lot that all of us can learn and do together. But thanks a lot for them, and I don't want to let's say eat in your times. We are already running late. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and I'm sure that we'll have like great working group and more successful meetups going ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all of you for joining and wonderful discussions.